All right, so lesson 16, Introduction to Democracy. In an ideal world, this quote from John Saul is on the test. This idea about democracy isn't about decisiveness, it's about consideration. It is intended to be inefficient. In an ideal world, there's room in a test of 32 questions to have that. It's tough to get everything on a test, but I'd like to say that it should be on there. That's no guarantee it is. But what the quote is asking us to identify is the idea that, if people celebrate authoritarianism because it's efficient, the idea is that democracy is meant to be inefficient. It's in its inefficiency that is the glory of democracy, because we actually consult a plurality of opinions, that it values multiple opinions, that there's no need for conformity. And there's this idea of wisdom in the group, rather than looking at one or just a select few for the answers. So that may be on the test. If it's not, and you ever get to write a political systems essay again and you're trying to celebrate a democracy, I think this is an argument that you could be including into your essay. Contrasting John Ralston Saul with Mussolini's everything within the state, nothing against the state, everything for the state kind of idea, right? Or that idea of submission to the supreme will. That's a nice contrast. Definitely when I look at your cast of characters, I'll be looking for John Ralston Saul. It's one of those people that maybe we don't mention as much as Hobbes and Locke and Smith and Marx, but I think that his ideological perspective is important enough that he needs to be in your list of characters. As to is this concept that, and those of you that did the optional A1, you ended up seeing this quote earlier in the year, in that optional A1. The idea that a democracy maybe can afford everyone their full array of civil liberties when times are good. Problems are few. But it's when we do have a crisis, that's when democracies potentially end up being lured into the attraction of authoritarian states. This is when they begin to behave like dictatorships and begin to force obedience and begin to silence opposition, silence dissent, and demand unity of focus and purpose to overcome the enemy. So this is meant to contrast that. This is saying that a democracy is stronger because it consults others. This is saying that a democracy is only strong in good times, and it's during bad times, that's when we see the advantage of an authoritarian state, because they don't need to consult others. FDR is on the side of John Ralston Saul here, and that's a short quote, easy quote to put into an essay. It'd be an easy quote to build into a multiple choice question as well, celebrating the wisdom of the crowd. Recurring theme here is going to be, legitimacy and accountability based upon the nature of mankind. Because Locke says we're rational, reasonable people, then government must exist to not only protect and promote and celebrate, but to put into place our freedom, right? To bring our will into policy. And that's why democracy is about the will of the people. Although Hayek is from the previous unit, the economic unit, there is a little bit of an overlap here for your cast of characters. This concept that, socialism is the road to serfdom, that when we sacrifice some of our economic liberty, then those that are big enough to provide for us economically are also big enough to demand from us politically and socially. And that's the road to serfdom. The idea that if I expect, free money from, Justin Trudeau instead of the Fraser Institute, the bastions of capitalism that they are, if I expect free money from the government, then I should expect the government to also have conditions on that money, like obedience. The concept of anarchism could come up. You know, what is anarchy? Anarchy is a vision of having no government, that all governments are the problem. The goal of anarchy is to have no government. Now, how would that work? It might be tough. Everybody's supposed to be, good to each other based upon the golden rule, but that's anarchism. Special interest groups we come up with again later in the course, so we'll leave that. Some of you might recognize that source from the A1. The media, the role of the media, the idea of the media is meant to be a watchdog, an instrument or a vehicle of accountability, that government's a long ways away, so the media serves us by looking into government for us, watching government for corruption and scandal and reporting that back to us. But the idea is that in Canada, the loyalty of the media is corrupted because one of the main media instruments in Canada is the CBC. It's nationally owned. It's controlled by the government. So how can you expect a government-funded news agency to question the government? If you expect a government-funded news agency to question the government, then you're a moron. And another problem with the legitimacy of this watchdog relationship is that the watchdog's been corrupted by, in other countries like the United States, by corporate interests. So they're not functioning on the behalf of the people, they have a different master. And that was a part of that conversation with the media. Again, I could probably give you 40 multiple choice questions just on the media, but there's only 32 on the whole test, because I find that students get fatigued on a test and then they just start guessing. So 32 is kind of the golden number for a 75-minute class. If you're going to have questions on the media, there might be 2. There's not going to be 10. There's a cartoon straight out of your Social 10 textbook about media convergence and concentration ownership of the media, and the lack of different opinions. And that's the lesson. There's some essay sources at the end, but nothing to really concern yourself about with the multiple choice. The next lesson, lesson 17, is going to focus more on chapter 10 of the textbook and the differences between Canada and the United States systems. I'll get you to read that now, and we'll check in 5 to 10 minutes and see if you have any questions.